Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 42 of Inspiring Insights. Diaret, Kanistantu, Guramahagif, Ishmisha Aaron Edwards. Hello, good day. That's all Gaelic for hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Erin. I'm your host. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. And this is episode number 42. Wow, I cannot believe it. And I am absolutely overjoyed to be ending off Pride Month with a very special guest here today, Rev Erika Allison, who I'm going to introduce in a second. But thank you so much, Erika, for being here. I want to give a special thanks before I get going to the Whole Human Foundation for sponsoring this episode. The Whole Human Foundation is a nonprofit organization bringing together well-being seekers and solution builders to address barriers in health, vitality, science, and innovation through events, partnerships, and consulting. Check them out at wholehumanfoundation.org. A little bit about me, your host. I'm an uprooted Newfoundlander. I have Irish and Welsh descendants. I am the offspring of two teachers. I have very much to learn and step into in my own teachings, including the online mindfulness course that I offer. It's from a more intersectional queer feminist lens. Who would have thought that we could learn mindfulness from that lens? And we are launching actually this coming Monday, July 5th. So you can go ahead and register at reawakenco.podia.com/MBSR course. And I'll put that link there for you in the show notes, everybody. So now I guide soul-centered human transformation. Physically, I take up space in Takaranto. And this is a land that was tended and still is tended by many nations, including the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas of the Credit peoples. And on the eve of what has been traditionally celebrated as Canada Day here north of the border for the past 153 years, I invite you all to actually, instead of spending money on fireworks and wearing red tomorrow, why don't we just sit for that for a second or more, maybe even for a day or hopefully longer than that, and really spend some time getting to know the Indigenous folks of your area, spend the money that you probably would have spent on fireworks, take that money and put it into Indigenous communities, organizations that are around you. And there's a ton of residential school survivor funds. I'm going to put some links as well in the show notes for everybody who's interested in learning a little bit more about your own local Indigenous organizations. So podcasts, they have a lot of potential for healing, and I am in the business of healing. Hosting this even has been really great for my own soul-centered human transformation and my own mindfulness and compassion journey. And I can't wait to introduce Reverend Erika Allison here tonight. And if anybody out there in the internet world, maybe Ethernet too, I don't know how many worlds there are. I love seeing you all pop in, say hello. Drop anything you like in the comments, whether you liked it, whether you have questions or comments. I always get email notifications regarding any comments or questions. So please do, don't be hesitant to interact with us as we speak. And without further ado, Reverend Erika Allison. Hey, welcome to the show, Erika.
Thank you.
Let me read your little bio that you provided, and then let's talk a lot about queerness and spirituality and all that good stuff.
My favorite topics.
Yes. Erika Allison is an interfaith minister, inspirational speaker, and workshop leader who helps people recover from identity harm, build their inner compass, and live joyful, authentic lives. She's the author of Gay the Pray Away, Healing Your Life, Love, and Relationships.
I'll do it.
Oh, there you go. You got it. Yeah.
Oh, you got it. You got it through the blur. There we go.
I'm holding it up for everyone who's listening on a podcast right now. You can't see the book cover, but it's amazing. Gay the Pray Away, Healing Your Life, Love, and Relationships from the Harms of LGBT Conversion Therapy. And Erika leads a monthly gathering called Gay the Pray to help the queer community find spiritual belonging and liberation, which I have joined, by the way, and it is phenomenal and very exciting. It's basically going to the Pride Parade. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. So formally, Erika, you're an engineer, an educator, And Erika's career spans positions in corporations, nonprofits, school systems, universities. Reverend Erika was recently named to Queerency's 100 Women list, celebrating LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs, leaders, and creators. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
I'm so
being
excited
here.
to be on your podcast. I've admired it from a distance, and I've always wondered when is it going to be? When do I get to go talk?
When's it gonna
Here
be
we are.
you?
When's it
I'm
gonna be?
so pumped to have you here. And I know we've done a few events already.
Yes.
Erika and I know each other through this amazing organization called CEO. And oh, beautiful, beautiful things. But aside from your bio, Erika, can you tell us maybe a little bit more about your own journey and what, how came to be this book that you authored and where you are today as a reverend?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to start by saying that we met each other doing a book swap, and I brought my paraphernalia today. So I sent my book to Aaron. Aaron sent their book to me, and here we are swapping books and not swapping stories. So I'm really happy to be here. All right. So yes, I loved when you did your intro that you said who you were the offspring of. So I'll start there too. I love that place of saying, so I am the offspring of an engineer and a teacher. And what's fascinating about that is that when I decided what I wanted to be when I grew up, the first thing I picked was engineer. But then my mom she always said to me, well, whatever you do, don't be a teacher. It's really, it's so hard and it's so thankless and, long hours, all these things. And I said, yeah, don't worry, I'll never be a teacher. And then about 5 years into my engineering career, I call my mom and I'm like, Mom, I think I'm going to become a teacher. And she's like, yeah, I actually knew you would. So I did spend a few years teaching high school, which was really great, coming from an engineering background and then teaching kids, mainly really trying to inspire girls to embrace science and engineering identities and think about that, like open access for those careers. So anyways, that's kind of like a past life of mine, really. It feels like I've lived many lifetimes. Maybe it's coming up because this is episode 42, and isn't 42 like the number of all numbers in the galaxy? Like, isn't there some trope about 42 being
I feel like there's a lot of trope about a lot of numbers. I'm not sure, to be honest, but 42 sounds great. Yeah.
I think maybe somebody can like comment if they know this trope, but there's something about 42 being like the number of everything of the universe, like the number. Anyway, so here we are talking about past lives and current lives in 42. But so what I do now is I'm an interfaith minister, as Aaron mentioned. And what drew me to this work was, it was kind of my own healing journey. You could probably tell by the title of my book, I am a survivor of what's called conversion therapy. So grew up in Texas, conservative household, Christian household. And when I came out as gay, the community didn't really know what to do with me and with that. And the prevailing wisdom at the time in that line of thinking and line of belief was that is bad, needs to be changed. And so conversion therapy and other things in that family are intended to try to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. Fast forward to several years where we've actually learned what the consequences are of such efforts, and they've been debunked. These efforts don't work. They're harmful. Some of the tragic statistics are around suicide rates. Children who go through this, or youth, or people, adults even, who go through this are more than 8 times more likely to commit suicide. They're more than 3.5 times more likely to have very, very acute depression issues, anxiety issues. And then there's all kinds of things about like 3.5 times more likely to use illegal drugs and have risky sexual behaviors. And so there are a lot of things that happen when people get rejected for their core identity. Go figure. So my work really focuses on how do we help people who have been harmed in religious contexts, so specifically religious context, but really any context, rebuild themselves, like find the places where negative messaging was really internalized. That's what I found for myself. I had internalized these messages. So even though conversion therapy had stopped telling me, because I left, they stopped telling me that who I was not lovable by God. I walked away from there, continuing to carry the message that who I was not lovable. And then I played out scenarios in my life that would confirm that belief that I was holding. So my work really is on what are the longer term effects of those rejection messages that we internalize, the internalized self, non-acceptance. And then what are the pathways that can help us rebuild that and get back to a place of inherent wholeness where we recognize and are aware and acknowledging our inherent wholeness and goodness.
Oh my goodness. First of all, Erika, thank you so much for being vulnerable and, sharing what you went through as a child or a teen. It's really not easy to go back there and to talk about it all the time. So thank you for that. And also, you wrote your whole book based around that, and it takes so much courage to do that. And, just by being around you, I can tell that you have a lot of courage and a lot of heart. You're really coming from your heart space. And that really, really speaks to me in so many ways. And it comes through, in your Gay the Prey liberation little parties that you do. Interfaith minister.
Yes.
How did you, go from engineering to teacher to being a minister?
Yeah, and with the baggage that came, like when I left conversion therapy and I left religion as well, because I felt like, okay, well, I'm not conforming to what you want for me, so I don't fit here.
Right.
And I think this is true of a lot of people in the queer community who have experienced kind of religious rejection from their upbringing. A lot of us do leave the religious context for a while. So that was common. I did that. And I never thought I'd be a minister. That was like the last thing I thought I would be. And as I talk about this in the book, that one of the consequences of an experience, I call it identity harm. Conversion therapy was my version of it, but identity harm, like a group of people or outside influences telling me who I am is not okay. One of the consequences is people pleasing. Like that's common, that a lot of people become that. And I saw myself doing that with my career, like people pleasing, trying to, being an engineer. I loved being a teacher, but I also know I was doing it in some ways because it was people looked at me as if I was a good person, right? Like good people are teachers. And so here I am yet again trying to prove I'm a good person because I'm carrying around messaging that I'm not a good person. And I'm trying to always compensate for that and make up for that. And so when it came to ministry, like even I know, if I'm truly honest, one of the reasons I went into ministry was because that was like another layer of my healing, was to kind of prove that I am a spiritual person. Look, I'm not, God doesn't hate me. I don't hate God. Like that's not true. So I went in, I believe, still trying to prove myself, still trying to be like a people pleaser and letting everyone know that I'm a good person, especially maybe my family, like, wanting them to think that just because I'm gay doesn't mean I'm going to hell and I'm a terrible person. So like really the motivation for me was still like a response to wounding. And I own that, because I feel like sometimes wounds are an opportunity for us to step into a role that is good for myself and the world. And so, I own that a wound got me there, but the good news is that the wound also got healed through the process. There was something about my higher self telling me, go do this. Like I did feel that calling that people say ministers feel, this calling. I did feel this calling that my life needed to be reflecting and integrating my spirituality into it. So the interfaith minister was really, it was a combination of those two things. And when I was in the program, thankfully, and I searched for this, I picked a program that was extremely queer centric and queer affirming. And that changed everything. I mean, it was so healing of my relationships with spirituality and the G word, God, and other things, because what I saw around me was not like me, the different one, trying to fit into this place where I really wasn't welcome and really wasn't accepted and was maybe tolerated if I was lucky. It wasn't that. My experience was very affirming, and not only were about a third of my classmates queer, this was the key. About a third of the presenters that came in and were the guest teachers were also queer. And that to me was a game changer, because I saw like, not only do I need to like hide in the back row because I'm that queer one trying to be spiritual, these were people on a stage like teaching. And I never thought I would be like a spiritual teacher, because I never thought I could do that. I always thought, well, because I'm queer, I'm never really going to be able to do that. And it showed me a new possibility. So when I got ordained, I was kind of like, all right, I'm open to whatever ministry wants to show itself. And that's, the book came from that. The kind of the next unfolding was share your story, share this story, help people find that healing that you just felt, that you just experienced by going through a spiritual healing and, tending to all of those wounds. Like I just got to do, and like I got to do when I was in seminary. How can I now offer that to others? Because I felt how healing that could be.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's juicy, unfortunately, this like topic is actually so juicy because I'm resonating so hard with you. I was, born and raised in a
Mm.
Catholic family, and very similar. I mean, I didn't go through conversion therapy, but definitely believed that I was wrong, to
Yes.
be queer. And I'm sure there's so many people out there that are along the same lines. And now that I see almost from a 2020 hindsight perspective, I've been through medical school, and this similar thing happens in healthcare where you put blame on the patient.
Mm.
Okay. So you basically tell them like there's something wrong with you, and we're going to try and fix you because like this is the external system and this is what we do, and we're just going to oppress you. Like we're literally going to just put you in this other box and try all these things and see what works. And I mean, it's out of love in a way, right? And
Oh, I have so much to say about that topic.
oh
Yes.
my God, maybe we can talk about that for a second, because like the religious trauma goes hand in hand with this oppression that we face from patriarchal structures that we're in, systems that we're in. And then even just thinking of, the residential school survivors and the government oppression and everything that's secrets and lies and everything that have just been put under the rug for so long. It's like all very similar, this theme of really just, you're wrong. Let us fix you.
Yep.
And even if you feel bad about that or feel different, we're still going to try, and you should be happy. You should be happy that we're even trying.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, so first of all, about the systems piece, I feel like so much of our society revolves around systems of fixing, right? Like the entire way consumerism works is make you feel like you need to fix something and then buy the product that fixes that thing, right? So like
Totally.
we're always having those messages reinforced of you're not quite right, something's not quite right, you need to fix something. If you just had this, if you just look like this, if you just drank this, all these things, you would be fixed. And so, yeah, I think that in of itself is not unique to the religious system. I think that exists, like you're saying, medical systems and definitely the financial systems and all of these systems, which
Yes.
the good news is I think those systems are crumbling. I mean, I think we're seeing evidence of those systems coming down as more people are waking up and realizing, and I have a whole soapbox about this, but like those of us who have had to bump into the edges of systems and see them crumble before our eyes. Like my identity was tied into the religious system. And when that system didn't fit for me anymore, it crumbled, and with it part of my identity. And then I was stuck there like holding the pieces, like, how do I rebuild this? But the interesting thing is I learned how to rebuild it. I learned how to ask the questions, how to go within, how to do my own self-discovery, how to stop relying on the systems for the answers and go into my own wisdom for the answers. And what that has done is it's positioned me now that when other people are bumping into systems, I can help them. I can tell them like, look, you're not going to die. Yes, your identity is tied into that system. Let's say the medical system or whatever. Like, yeah, maybe you've put all your belief in a system working for you a certain way, and now it isn't. What are you going to do? I feel like those of us who've already been there and done that, we've already had to deal with a system collapsing. Like you, for example, like I know your story is that you left kind of the traditional medical pathway and went into your version of like, you've created your own version because you bumped into systems and you're like, wait, this doesn't work. This is too patriarchal. This is too oppressive. This isn't the way that I feel and want to represent. And so when we've done that, we now have this amazing ability to help the next generation of people who are bumping into their edges of systems and help show them, here's how you can come through that. You will survive and you'll come back even stronger and deeper in your identity.
Yes. And in a way, it's, I saying this with the utmost love. In a way, it's like almost important to kind of walk on the edge, to feel that little bumpy part, on the highway when you're driving and you kind of swerve a little bit. It's like, oh, right, I'm on this path, right? And you almost need a little bit of abrasion to say, okay, yeah, I'm reminded that I'm going to be like going on the straight and narrow here. No pun intended.
Right. Like, oh, I'm still here. I'm still awake. I think those little bumps are supposed to wake you up if you fall asleep on the highway. So it's a great analogy because like, I don't know, I found that I woke up when I bumped into the edges of religion, and it didn't, like, it woke me up. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. I've been just kind of following this thing that I was, the system. I was in it. And the wheel, the little lines on the side woke me up, and I was like, wait a minute, this isn't actually all that I believed it to be. And now now that I'm awake, let me find out what's real here.
Yeah.
But the love thing, Erin, I love to talk about that piece, because like you said, none of the people in these systems, for the most part, are bad people. And I see this, like, this has been one of my biggest healing moments with my story, is like, my parents did what they did out of love. It was completely love based. Like, they really believed that I was going to hell, and therefore the most loving thing as parents they could do was to try to save me from that fate, right?
Yeah.
So like, I sometimes will tell people when I'm doing spiritual counseling and coaching with them that it's one of the few traumas that is motivated by love. So it's confusing, right? Like, I know they loved me, but yet I still got harmed.
Yes.
And so it's not only about good intentions. Like, they had the best of intentions, but there was still an outcome that was damaging. And so, like, I think we have a responsibility to be aware enough of our actions that we don't just rely on intention, that we look at outcomes as well. Like, that's super important in all of the social justice movements. I know that as we're waking up to the social justice issues that are happening and have always been happening, one of the taglines there, one of the talking points there, is not just intent, but action, right? We don't need more well-intentioned people who are just kind of bumbling around and still stepping on other people's toes.
Right.
We need people who have both good intentions and are responsible for the outcomes of their actions. And so that's the call. But it's tricky when the trauma is motivated by love, because for much of my life, I didn't take it seriously. Like, I didn't call it trauma. Like, how could that be trauma if it was like, it was misguided? My parents misunderstood, but they didn't mean to hurt me. So therefore it must not have really hurt me. Like, that's kind of that was my logical mind. If they didn't mean to, so it probably didn't hurt me. And what really opened the door to my true healing was me admitting that, no, that was traumatic. That actually did cause me harm, even though their intentions were good. And I know they came from love. I now have to own the fact that that was harmful to me. And I need to, by owning that, I can actually get the kind of help and support I need, versus when I don't own that, when I would tell myself, no big deal, no harm, no foul. They didn't mean it, must not have hurt me. I was not supporting myself in my healing in the way I needed to.
Right. Oh, I have goosebumps as you speak. It's out of love, and it's so interesting. I want to talk for a second, if you're comfortable, Erika.
Sure.
This kind of like sense of religious trauma, and how do we make up for that? Like, do we point the blame, and are we maybe being moralistic by pointing the finger at the church, or these institutions that have to make up for their wrongs somehow? Or do they have to make up for their wrongs? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
As I've been speaking more on this topic since my book got published in January of 2021, so I've been speaking about it since then, I've spoken to groups that are religious groups. And what I've discovered by talking to them is that, well, nobody likes to have the finger pointed at them.
Totally.
But at the same time, like, I also bring into my talk the fact that it's been allies who have helped the queer community get to where we are today. I think of the example of gay marriage. I was living in Maine when gay marriage was coming into a thing, like when it was becoming legalized. Mm-hmm. And we fought for it in our state first, and then it became federally recognized. But when we were fighting for it in the state, the first time it got on the ballot, we lost. And then the second time it passed. And I had friends who were part of the organizing team of all of the movements, the political movements for gay marriage. And I asked them, like, what was the difference? Why did we win this time and not the time before? And my friend said it was the allies. The allies came out this time. Like, the first round, it was just all the queers, and that isn't enough to move a needle. But when the allies came out, when leaders of churches, straight leaders of churches, started speaking out, when the more liberal and more progressive, religious leaders said, wait, don't put us all in this bucket. Don't lump all of religion into this viewpoint, because we're not. We all have different viewpoints, and we see things differently. So I'm always very cautious to say, first of all, I don't want to ever just lump all of religion together, because it's not true. In fact, progressive religion has really helped further this cause.
Yeah.
But as far as what can be done, I mean, I think we could ask that question of everything from what's happened to queer people in religion, but just what's happening everywhere in the world. Like obviously what's up right now in Canada. I think we do have responsibility to, like, my dream, I'm just going to dream right now. My dream would be, I know how privileged I am to have healed the way that I've healed. And when I look at how I healed, it's because I went to a shit ton of workshops, and I worked with a shit ton of counselors, and I did a bunch of work. But it's not just because I was alone doing the work. Like, I had resources to seek out the help I needed. If I needed to go to a workshop, I went. If I needed to go meditate on a silent retreat, I went. And I'm very, very aware that that's been a privilege of mine, to have both the time and the money to do those things. So what I would dream is that the way that kind of these religious organizations, should I keep talking? I'm going to keep talking. The way that these religious organizations would continue to make amends would be, and I just kept talking, Erin, I hope you didn't mind.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So just that maybe things that are not accessible to all people would become more accessible, so that these religious institutions that cause this harm would become part of the solution. They'd become part of funding help for the queer community who need mental health support or emotional health support or spiritual health support, so that those who don't have the access, the time, or the money to get the services they need, maybe there's a way that that's where the church and the straight religious community who is supportive of this cause can step in and help. That's just a dream. I mean, how do you make that a reality? We could have a whole nother podcast on that topic, because it needs to happen everywhere. It's part of all social justice movements that needs to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. And also, conversion therapy, like you said, is still legal in so many states.
Oh my
right?
gosh. Yes. So first of all, I'll tell you, the last report I read is that over 700,000 people have experienced conversion therapy. So that's a high number. And
Wow.
then half of those have been people who are 18 years and younger. So it's still an epidemic amongst youth as well, like youth being forced into this. Thankfully, with the amount of knowledge there is now about suicide, some parents are beginning to think twice. Like, my parents didn't know the statistics about suicide. I think if they did, maybe they would have said, like, whoa, wait a minute. I have a friend who will say, if you knew that you could put your kid in a program and it might, quote, fix them, but there's a 57% chance that they would kill themselves, would you do it? Would you do that? Would you make that choice? I think that changes the game when you think of it in that term. But yeah, I mean, it's conversion therapy it's still going on. I think 20 states in our country have banned it officially. But even the bans, as we change the judicial system, as judges get appointed from more conservative leaders, those legislation pieces that are in place get challenged. And we just had this happen in Florida within this, I think maybe early this year it happened, that Florida had a bunch of bans on the books in like Miami and some of the more progressive areas. And they got challenged, they got appealed, and they got challenged in the appellate court. And because new judges had been put in place who are more conservative, those could be overturned. So it's not even like once one state's down, you can check the box and say, okay, now that state is safe. Not really, not as long as people still believe this is needed and helpful. If that misguided view continues to exist, people will continue to find ways to do therapies like this, even if they change the name, which has been done 1,000 times. People now have changed the name from conversion therapy to reparative therapy, and from reparative therapy to ex-gay therapy. I mean, like, they keep trying to come up with new ways to name it so that it gets around some of the rules and restrictions.
Wow, I am appalled. I'm appalled. And if there's anyone in Canada who knows some statistics from provinces or nationwide, I would love to hear those as well. I think it's super important to know, the rates of depression, the suicide rates, not to mention the, child and teen abuse, because it's happening to mostly teenagers, right? So
when it's very intersectional, because, so first of all, I think people have heard these statistics about, so let's say that a kid comes out, their parents kick them out because the church said it's not okay. They go through conversion therapy, it doesn't work. So then the parents are like, well, then I disown you because you're not trying hard enough, right? So now fast forward, that kid has been put out on the street. we've seen the rates of youth who are homeless, who then either go into prison or have to take up really risky sexual behaviors to try to just survive and pay for their livelihood. So all of these, and then mental health issues come into play. So all of these issues compound on top of each other. And then add race on top of that. And you have like certain families from a race perspective are even more conservative about it because of the religious beliefs they were taught or the cultural beliefs that they were given or norms they were given. And so it's a very intersectional issue. And the issue of religious acceptance can very quickly become an issue of homelessness, which can very quickly become an issue of mental health. And before you know it, all these systems are interacting with each other.
Yes, so complex, so complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little like I'm a little bit flabbergasted just by like bringing it up is definitely a huge thing. I didn't realize that you just said only 20 states have banned conversion therapy, so that's less than half.
Yeah.
Of the United States. Wow.
And I wish I knew the status in Canada. I know that I heard it was either being banned at the national level or had been banned. And I'm not sure if it has been or if it's under consideration, but there's something going on nationally in Canada about conversion therapy. And the same is true in the UK, actually. The Queen has come out recently to talk about conversion therapy and to say, like, she's made her edict that it's going to be banned. I don't know what has to happen legally for that to follow through. But I know it's up in a lot of countries now to like, what are we doing? The data is as clear as it possibly can be. And just to, I think every reputable mental health and medical organization, mental health and medical, have discredited this practice. So it's not like it's controversial. Like pretty much everyone has come out against it. So the fact that we don't have universal agreement on this is really challenging.
Yeah, and how it just seems archaic. But like you said, it is a dynamic system. As our governments change, things start to change. And I want to get into, thank you so much for that. Just like blowing my mind, really. I want to get into this sense of spiritual liberation because, enough talk about we have to talk about, all the bad things that come out of that, but also what does it mean to kind of rekindle your relationship with spirit, whether it be inside or outside of a religion at this point? I'm finding a lot of folks in my generation and lower, the millennials plus, Gen Zs, are very spiritually liberated in ways that are just beyond even what I would have thought the world would be like at this point in time. What are your thoughts on liberation and spirituality?
Yeah, and I would say that luckily the generations are more liberated in many, many ways, which is so helpful. And I think it's going to move us. It's going to accelerate us as humanity in waking up more, which is fantastic. So spiritual liberation is my passion. And here's why. Because I feel like those of us who have been harmed by religion, if we choose to stay harmed from religion and therefore to keep all things religion and spirituality outside of our lives, I actually believe that we are continuing the abuse on ourselves. Because my worldview, and I am a minister, so take that with a grain of salt, is that we are spiritual beings. Like our essence is soul and spirit. And we just have these suits on as we're having this human experience going through life, but that really at the core of who we are, it's more than just the matter. There's energy, right? Like there's the energy to who we are. And so and much of my life, I went through without acknowledging that part of me, without embracing that part of me, in fact, rejecting that part of me because that's where the pain was. And I felt like there was a period of time where I finally got to the point, I felt like I was going through life really small because all of my problems were that was my world. My world was small enough that it consisted of my mental construction and my problems, A. And then B, I felt like I just wasn't, I was like going through life with one hand behind my back. Like if I needed support, I had to source it from my own, like what I could figure out. And so like what really my spiritual awakening happened because of a breakup, actually. And for the first time, I ran into a situation that I couldn't fix or control or change. And that was mind blowing for me because I have the kind of mind that like historically I had been able, up until that point, I had been able to solve, like the engineer mind, right? Like I could solve the problem whatever
Right.
the problem was, I could solve it in my own capacity. And this time I was like, I tried for about a year and a half to solve this problem, and it didn't solve. I couldn't fix it. And it sent me down this spiral of like, holy cow, what do I do if I can't solve the problem?
Mm.
I didn't have, like, I had not embraced other support systems other than my mind. And so I was at a loss, and I was like in so much pain, and I couldn't fix it. So that's what set me searching for, like, okay, how do I relieve this pain I'm feeling? What's out there? And one of the first resources that crossed my mind was a book by Tara Brach, who is a Buddhist meditation teacher in the Vipassana tradition. And she wrote a book called Radical Acceptance. She's written many books, but the one that landed in my lap at this time in my life was Radical Acceptance. And it was so powerful for me because it helped me realize that I had been people pleasing everyone. I had been caring about everyone else's hearts except my own. I never had stopped to tend to my own heart. I was still trying to fix situations outside of me to get them to align the way I wanted them to align, never really just tending to my own suffering. And I went to a meditation retreat with her. It was the first meditation retreat I'd ever been to. And the first time I meditated, something mind-changing happened. I got space for myself. It was like I could see myself, and you get this, you're a mindfulness teacher.
Yeah.
I got this space from my mental chatter, like this much space. And just having this much space and realizing, like, wait a minute, all those stories I've been telling myself in my mind, like all these scenarios that I had built up, and all the past I had been replaying, and all the future I was trying to create, all of that was just blah, 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 blah. And here I was observing all that. And when I got that space, I'm like, that isn't my world. That world is so tiny and so like chaotic and so fleeting.
Yes.
Me, I'm something way more solid. I'm something way more expansive. I'm something way more unchangeable, unmovable. Like, that's all just a situation, whereas this is an essence. And that was like the beginning of the spiritual awakening of like, wait, then who am I? If I'm not this, and I'm not all these thoughts that I've been creating, then who am I really? And then this vision, just like my perspective just started to do this. And I started to realize, like, whoa, okay, wait, I'm part of a big system here. And I think I'm probably bigger than my body. I think I probably extend beyond my skin. I think I probably can feel things that I didn't energetically, that I didn't realize I could feel. And just so much opened up for me in that moment. And so that's the liberation, I think. And the key to liberation for me was shifting my mindset from they have the answers to I have the answers. Because before that, my spiritual health was in somebody else's hands. It was like I either fit or didn't fit into what they had designed as correct spirituality.
Yes.
But the liberation came when I said, wait a minute, you're not actually the authority over my soul. That's not how that works. And I took that in myself. And that was kind of like the unlocking of liberation, was moving the power center and the responsibility center to me, to within me. And that's when liberation happened. And I realized this is an inside job. This is very personal. Spirituality is very personal, and it's very dependent on just my makeup, my essence, my alignment. Like, it's very unique. It's not just a like one size fits all thing. And that was liberating to go from that narrow view to this expansive, beyond anything I can comprehend view.
You put it in such good words. Like, I am envisioning literally like stepping out of the box, like coming out of the closet, this like, and taking responsibility for yourself, for your own joy, for your own life, for what you can create instead of, fitting into something else.
And those of us in the queer community know that. Like, we had to do that with our queerness.
Yes.
So it's kind of the same process. It's that same step out of that box, realize who you really are, and begin to like own that and support yourself in your becoming of that. It's the same process for spiritual liberation. I think what gets in our way is that wounding. Like, we don't go there because we associate that spiritual stuff with that bad stuff that happened in our past, and therefore we don't want to go there. There's a block. But if we think of it like the same process of leaning into our queerness and just, becoming who we really are, it's that same becoming in a spiritual liberation.
Yes. 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 I love it. And that's the whole point about mindfulness is to really not avoid right?
Yes.
To not
Yes.
throw it under the rug, to look straight at your shit and say, okay, this looks like a big shadow. You know what? I have some light somewhere in me. I don't even see it, but it's there somewhat. I know it. And I'm going to take one step into that
Yes.
shadow. And I always say, if you can see your shadow, you must be standing in the light. There must be something there.
So good.
Right. And I love that so much, because that fosters all kinds of other creativity, other space for, yeah, liberation, for finding out what is outside of you, for finding your internal locus of control. There's so much that you pointed on, and it's juicy and I love it.
The mindfulness is so huge, because otherwise, what tool do we have to hold our own pain or to hold
Exactly.
our own discomfort? I know for most of my life, before I found like a mindfulness meditation practice or just practice of like coming home to myself, I couldn't look at it. It was too painful. I didn't have a skill set. Like I didn't have any skillful means to support myself. So all I could do was run away. And I know that's, you know, a lot of people do that in their own way, whether they, like in my case, I went into serial monogamous relationships trying to numb that longing and that pain. Some people turn to substances, right, and try to numb that pain. If we can develop tools to just be with whatever arises, and know that it's not going to overwhelm us, because we do have a set of tools to be with it, we can be there for ourselves so much more. And I just wish we taught this more. Like I wish everybody was taught mindfulness from such a young age, because imagine the toolbox we would be going through life with. We actually could be with ourselves and do the healing work we need, and not run from the scary emotions and not run from the challenges of life, but like face them head on, because we had a way of holding that was nourishing. And then we move through it because we're with it. We're with ourselves. We didn't abandon ourselves.
Oh, honey, you're speaking my vision for the world. That
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, imagine. Erika, this has been amazing. And I have another couple questions. Let's see,
Yeah.
time. You're okay for like 5
I'm
more
okay.
minutes? Yeah.
I'm in a weird concrete box, so we can keep going.
Erika's in a hotel room right now, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay, can we touch on joy? Can we finish this conversation with joy? What brings you joy? How did you find it? What is it?
My like persona has always been a very joyful person. Like I'm just wired in that way of like I have high energy, like I'm an energetic being.
Mm-hmm.
And so joy tends to be easy for me to access. And what's interesting is, you know, and this is something, my partner is a spiritual teacher as well. She invented something called journey dance. And she'll say this a lot of times, that your bandwidth, like your emotional bandwidth, your capacity to feel joy is completely dependent on your capacity to feel the opposite, like to the darker stuff. And so if you only allow yourself to feel a really narrow bandwidth of that, it means that like your sadness might be less, but your joy really has to be less as well. And so even though I'm wired for joyfulness, I was kind of keeping myself in this little narrow range of joy, because I didn't want to go very deep into sadness either. I just didn't have the tools for it. I wasn't prepared for it. So while I thought I was going through life joyfully, I really was going through like not taking deep pleasure in life, just kind of like, I still had a happy persona, but it was always tempered. And I think it was tempered because I wouldn't really expand my bandwidth. But joy is first of all, like for healing anyways, if we can get to a state of joy, our body is much more, like nervous system is much more able to go into the healing places. It's much like, think about when you're exhausted, because you're just like, I can't handle anymore, emotionally exhausted. You're not in a position to do the deep healing work because you're worn out, you're exhausted, you've been carrying around the heaviness. But if there's a moment in life that can allow for more joy, now you're in this place where you're like, all right, I have some capacity to go into that space and do a little bit of digging into myself, because I've been in this joyful place before. So, you know, as far as how to access joy, one thing I've learned is slowing down has brought me a lot of joy. I discovered, and COVID helped me discover this, that busyness was one of my coping strategies so that I didn't have to face all the emotions I was feeling. So staying busy, running around, like it left me not having to sit with myself, which I thought was going to be less painful. I thought sitting with myself would be more painful. Running around, staying busy would be less painful. But what I discovered when I really needed to sit with myself is that if I could get through that little arc of like discomfort, when it all starts to come up, and then, you know, working with people like Erin who have mindfulness based techniques, so I had some capacity to sit with myself. All of a sudden, it's like I broke through this other side where joy was in every moment. It was like I could be sitting, and this, I know this is a mindfulness technique that you use in MBSR. Like I could be looking at that raisin, and I could be smelling it, and I could be tasting it, and I could be, you know, listening to it, and be in like ecstasy and bliss because I've learned, I came into the joy of the present moment, which was so different than the joy chasing that I, for other parts in my life, was trying to do. So I don't know if that's where you were thinking of going with joy, but that's kind of how it showed up in my life. Of like the real joy came from sitting with me, being with myself, even though that felt terrifying. When I finally did it, I found a joy there that was, you know, I had to break through something. I had to break through the discomfort, but it was a faster breakthrough than I ever expected. And then it just left joy. Like there was just joy there, joy with being with me, joy with now it doesn't really matter what I'm doing because there's just this joy that goes with it because the joy is from me. The joy is within.
Yes, it's not from an external source.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Erika. And I really resonated with that too, because for a long time, and I I would say I'm very well acquainted with depression, I felt very sad and almost like you described, like my window of tolerance, but my emotional tolerance was only like was skewed one way toward the sadness, right? And I couldn't get to like happy. And then I realized, and I write about this in my book, yeah, it's like this rubber band effect where if you lean into that depression and if you go into it, and it wasn't easy, you know, and you need the supports for sure, and you need a lot of therapy.
Yeah.
But when you do, you start to realize that, oh, I'm actually an emotional being and I have this expansiveness. And because I leaned one way over here, you know, on the left-hand side, all of a sudden I know what it's like to be on the right-hand side. It's like this space where you just open up.
Yeah.
And that for me was huge. And for a lot of folks, people I've worked with, they're in that space. They're in that sadness. They don't know how to access joy. And I think that's so important to learn, right? And it's not easy, but these are some of the tools and techniques that you and I use, and that's beautiful. And I so wish that people, you know, if you're straight or gay or queer or whatever, go to one of Erika's Gay the Prey events. It's literally amazing, and it will uplift you for sure, whatever space you're in. Speaking of, Erika, yeah, do you have any of those coming up?
Yes. So they're always on the first Sunday of each month.
Okay.
The month of July, I don't know when this is going to be aired, but the month of July, because it's a holiday weekend in the US, we're taking a summer vacation.
Got
So
it.
no, there will be no July, but in August, it will be August 1st, 2001, will be the next one. And then you can just look at your calendar and it's kind of the first Sunday of each month. From there, you can go to the website gaythepray.com, and it'll always have what the latest date is, and it'll have the link there to sign up. This is a totally free event. I mean, this is like, you know, you don't pay to go to church, you don't pay to go to Gay the Prey, but you can certainly make an offering and make a donation if you'd like to. But yeah, the idea is really going into that place of celebration and joy. I will jokingly say if a pride parade and a meditation event had a baby, it would be Gay the Prey. So it's like bringing all the fun and joy of our queerness, like celebrating, and allies are welcome too, as long as you're willing to celebrate our queerness with us. So it's like going there to that place of like, wait a minute, I'm awesome. Who I am is amazing. And now let's bring in some of the spirituality that is I deserve to have that in my life. I deserve to be in my own right relation with spirituality, because that's my gift. That's here for me. And I'm not punishing anybody else by me staying separate from my spiritual life. Like all I'm doing is causing myself pain. I'm not causing anybody else pain, just me, by not connecting into that spiritual support that I could have if I opened to it.
Yes, yes, gaytheprey.com. You can also find Erika's book, Gay the Prey, on Amazon,
Yep,
correct?
Gay the Pray Away, and it's on both Amazon, and if you like hearing me talk, I narrated the audiobook version, so you can go onto Audible and get the audiobook version if you want me to just read it to you. If you're too lazy to read it yourself, I'll read it to you, no problem.
Yes, I love that it's on Audible. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks. It was so fun.
Woo! I want to ask you one final question, Erika,
Yeah.
and this is something I finish with every one of my guests here on Inspiring Insights. And you can answer as much or as little detail as you like.
Okay.
But the final question is, what inspires you?
Hmm. Hmm. So I'm going to sound geeky,
I
but
love
I
geeks.
I am totally inspired by learning new things about myself, like no joke. So like when I can do self-discovery work, when I can find that moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have been blocking myself from that my whole life, or oh my gosh, I've been holding on to that thing for so long. Like when that aha moment comes up and I'm like, wow, I can see it, because now that I can see it, I can let go of it. That is like, I get so inspired in those moments. I'm like, yes, I can, like there's yet another layer of growth that I'm going to be able to experience in this lifetime. And what motivates that for me is like I watch myself show up in the world, and I know how I want to show up, and then I know how I do show up. And not always do I show up how I want to. Like I want to show up as this like just force of unconditional love all the time. And I don't always do that because I have triggers and I have limitations and all these things. So when I do this, like when I have these inspiring moments of clarity, I can see like, wow, I've been blocking love either coming in, I've either been blocking receiving it or blocking letting it out. And when I find those, I get so inspired because I know I can live into more of who I want to be in the world.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. Yes, all about the love. Thank you, Reverend Erika Allison. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and your own inspiring insights.
Yes, well, thank you for holding such a beautiful space and for keeping these programs going so that more and more people can hear them and maybe find exactly what they need.
Yes, thanks everyone. This has been episode 42 of Inspiring
42,
Insights. Thanks
42.
again. Big thanks to the Whole Human Foundation for sponsoring this episode, for keeping this podcast going. And if you would like to sponsor an episode, just shoot me an email. My email is hello@reawakenco.com. And don't forget the mindfulness-based stress reduction course. We're launching that this coming Monday. There's still time to register, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments as well. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a lovely evening.